Earlier this year, I reviewed the Galaxy Z Fold 2, which I found to be an incredible device with just a few shortcomings. Now I've got the Galaxy Z Fold 3, which has a number of big upgrades at a lower price point. But after using the Z Fold 3 for a couple weeks, can I say it's a significant upgrade over the Z Fold 2? Let's talk about it. This is NOISO, and this is the Galaxy Z Fold 3 versus 2. When I first saw renders of the Z Fold 3, I was a little bit worried because it appeared to be a complete design copy of the Z Fold 2, but that's not quite the case. First of all, the dimensions are a little bit different, with the depth being a little bit smaller, meaning that it's a little more comfortable to fit in my hand. The bigger difference actually comes from the external design of the frame, where before we had this big, graded, kind of textured metal design on the outside frame. Now it's gone and it's smooth, and it's actually a lot flatter as well. This has led to a little bit more slickness in holding it, but it's a lot more comfortable for me because I don't have any sharp edges that I have to deal with like I had with the Z Fold 2. The hinge of these two devices still feels quite similar, meaning that I'm still gripping onto the hinge for a lot of the one-handed use. The small screen on the outside, thin screen on the outside, still is not perfect for one-handed use for me. Even though it is easy to reach my thumb across, it still doesn't feel like it's a full smartphone experience. And there are still a number of apps that don't render properly in that smaller space. Now, granted, now you have a full 120 Hz refresh rate on the outside screen, meaning that the experience is a little bit better, but I really didn't tell a massive difference considering I don't use the outside screen that much. The inside screens of these two devices have a couple more differences. Notably, where I used to have the rubbery screen protector on the old Z Fold 2, now is a more glossy, kind of slippery screen protector on the Z Fold 3. As a result, the feeling of running your finger across it feels a lot better because it's less friction, but unfortunately I still have a lot of issues with fingerprints and grease like I did on my Z Fold 2. As a result, if I'm trying to use the Z Fold 3's screen out in broad daylight, often the brightness is not enough to get through the grime and fingerprints and glare that I experience on the front screen protector. This issue is still most prominent where I'm either looking at the device off-center or I've got a dark object on my screen, or I'm watching a dark video or something like that. I often still find myself looking and staring at myself in the reflection that's created by the screen, which is why I actually opt out of dark mode quite often. The other big difference with the internal display is where there used to be a complete hole punch cutout for the internal camera. Now there is instead a display that runs over the camera, and so as a result, there is kind of a more seamless edge-to-edge display. Now, on white surfaces or brighter surfaces, it is more obvious to see that the camera sits underneath the screen because it kind of gives a screen door effect that is a little bit distracting. But on darker surfaces, or when you're watching video, often that sort of part of the display kind of disappears and looks a lot better. Now, I wish they'd still had been able to move that camera to another corner of the display so it wouldn't show up when you're watching 16:9 content, for example. But I realized that even though I made that same recommendation in my Z Fold 2 review, that it's probably not possible to move it to the top right corner of the display because that's the same region where the internals sit for the rear-facing camera as well, and it's unlikely that they have enough internal space to fit both camera setups. So, I don't know what the best solution is. Personally, I don't find myself using the internal camera all that often, but I do understand if you're making video calls or something like that, you'd prefer using the internal camera rather than the external camera. When it comes to those rear cameras, I found that the setup is a lot more visually appealing on the Z Fold 3 than it was on the Z Fold 2. I just like the design a little bit better. Now, notably, this design doesn't follow the same design language as the S21 series that came out this year, but that's not too big of a deal. Now, in terms of quality, this is a significant boost in terms of quality from what I've seen in my testing. Over the last couple weeks, I've been able to use the Z Fold 3 comfortably and not have to worry about getting poor camera performance. I've been really impressed with the pictures coming from these cameras so far, but I'll get into more detail on those in the full review. Just know that going with the Z Fold 3 means that you're giving up on the 50 times zoom or the 10 times zoom of the S21 Ultra, which I have noticed kind of missing out on over the last couple weeks. What hasn't changed from the Z Fold 2 is taking pictures using the Z Fold 2 is a little bit awkward considering you either have to go with one hand with a small external viewfinder, or you have to use both hands to view the internal viewfinder, where I kind of have to use my second hand to balance the larger size. And so if I had my preference, it's a little bit more comfortable to use an S21 Ultra in one hand and still get a large viewfinder to see what I'm taking a picture of. One of the biggest frustrations that I had with the Z Fold 2 was with the side-mounted fingerprint sensor. Now, notably, I had said in my video that I would never enjoy a side-mounted fingerprint sensor again, and I hope that the Z Fold 3 had some other solution. And then I was worried when I saw that it unfortunately doesn't. But over the last couple weeks, I've been really impressed. In my Z Fold 2 review, I actually had many instances where I took screenshots every single time I had failed 5 attempts and I had to use my pen. And that number of screenshots really piled up. And since I started using my Z Fold 3, I have not yet once had to enter in my PIN because of failed attempts on the fingerprint sensor, which is just a massive improvement. Now, I think it might have something to do with either improvements in the fingerprint sensor's quality or the fact that now the device is flatter, so it's easier for me to position my fingers in the right place. Whatever the reason, I am really impressed, and now I'm perfectly fine with not having an in-display or Face ID unlock system. Finally, let's talk about the price. At $2,000, the Z Fold 2 was very tough to reach and very inaccessible to many people. At $1,800, the Z Fold 3 becomes a little more accessible, but is still very expensive. Now, I'm glad Samsung continues to drop the price to the point where many more people are going to be able to experience foldable devices. But I still think we're a couple years out before this becomes a more comparable price to the iPhone something Pro Max and the Galaxy S20 something Ultra. And so as a result, it is still an enthusiast price point. Now, if you are interested in the Z Fold 2, you might be able to find it for a closer price to under $1,000, which is a lot more accessible. But notably, those are more often refurbished models, and so the likelihood that the display might have some issues and you won't be covered by warranty becomes a little bit higher. Now, I'll talk more about durability in my full review of the Z Fold 3, but just know that I am not 100% confident in durability of foldable devices quite yet, and I've seen enough instances where either a fold or a flip has gotten damaged and someone is out a large amount of money. Of course, Samsung still covers their foldable devices with more premium warranties, so you're a little bit more at peace, but we'll have to see in the coming years whether more and more devices, foldable devices, end up broken than a more standard candy bar phone. As for me, I'm going to be keeping the Z Fold 3 and trading in the Z Fold 2, which means I'm going to have to say goodbye to one of my favorite devices that I've used so far. But if you're interested in seeing my full review of the Z Fold 3, be sure to get subscribed and let me know down in the comments what you want to see most. Thank you for watching NOISO. I hope you liked this video. Be sure to check out some of my other videos covering Android phones or anything else on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.